everyone. Welcome. And welcome to all those who are joining us via Zoom. I'm happy to be here with you this evening. As I thought about this talk in our beginning, it occurred to me that, like every talk, we need to begin with prayer. And if you've watched the news over the last couple of weeks, over the last couple of months, our world's kind of a mess. And God knows if there's any time that we need prayer, now is that time. So I want to introduce you to a word that I learned about when I was in Texas this summer. It's from South Africa, and it came as part of the reconciliation work that was done. And the word is called Ubuntu. I'm probably terribly mispronouncing it, so bear with me. And basically it says, I am because we are. Because we are, I am. Ubuntu is me, has we. United has one will be. And it really struck me in this time of division and this time of violence that we have to remember all those people that we're seeing about in the news that are losing their lives or being held hostage. Those are our brothers and sisters. So I invite you to hold them in prayer. I invite you to hold whoever has asked you to remember them in prayer as we begin. There we go.
We are part of everything, and everything is a part of us. We are human only through the humanity of others. I am because we are. Ubuntu.
Tales told throughout the sands of time. Outside with forms and of human crime. We're people beneath outside. Through other people we unite as one. A seed is planted and a flower grows. And a small tender kiss, that is how it goes. When a boy meets a girl under starlit skies, and the wedding of all is seen in their eyes.
Well, thank you for coming out on this dreary evening. I hope you will enjoy our talk. Since it's the end of the baseball season, as we begin to start the World Series, I'm going to use one of the only sports terms that I know. I am the cleanup hitter on our series for the Eucharist. So I get to finish up for all those who have gone before me, starting with Father Ron. And that's kind of a daunting task. So I hope you'll enjoy this. My hope is for this evening is that after our time together, we can embrace the actions and what we need to do as the people of God when we celebrate Eucharist. For those of you who don't know me, my journey in faith is probably very similar and has the same twists and turns that yours did. I'm a lifelong Catholic. I grew up just as the Second Vatican Council was ending. I've witnessed my share of guitar masses, clown masses, and everything in between. I took a vacation from God in my 20s after my father passed away. And thanks to my mother's gentle yet persistent prodding, I returned to the church in my 30s. My professional career took those same twists and turns as well. I began my career in healthcare management during the time of hospital closures and chaos in the industry. After one layoff too many, I accepted a position as the administrator of an interfaith AIDS network in California. At that moment, and as I was thinking about my past, I realized that's when I got my first nudge from God. You know all about those nudges. I realized that I was being called to serve the people of God. I went back to school and received my Master's of Divinity from the Jesuit School of Theology at Berkeley. My academic studies focused on two things that I'm very passionate about. The first is the role of the laity and how it's changed over the years. And the other is our celebration of liturgy, how we gather for Eucharist. What does the church ask us to do each time we come together? I became the parish administrator of one of the California missions and served there for 15 years. In 2011, I got another one of those nudges from God. And I was introduced to Precious Blood spirituality and the missionaries of the Precious Blood. I became a lay associate, we're called companions, with the missionaries. And in November 2014, I was asked to lead the companion movement. 2022, even though it was the end of COVID and people were starting to come out of things, it was a big year for me. I continued to follow that other nudge from God, and I received my doctorate in ministry from Fordham University. I was also named the first executive director of the Precious Blood Spirituality Institute. This is a new venture our community has to promote the spirituality and charisms shared by all the communities centered on precious blood spirituality in the United States. As you can see from my story, I like to stay active. I like to stay busy. One of the joys in my life is traveling. I love visiting new places, seeing new things, trying new food. I love airports. During the pandemic, I missed the airports. I'm not going to lie. While I love traveling, I've never been a big fan of packing. But I understand the need to plan ahead. I was a Girl Scout. When I first started traveling regularly, I packed way too much. You know, plan for emergencies, take an extra outfit just in case, that sort of thing. I've improved my packing over the years, but I'm still not a big fan. When I reflected on what I wanted to share with you tonight, the image of journey kept coming back to me. I believe that every time we gather for Eucharist, we are on a journey, both for that week and throughout our lives. This evening, I hope we can discuss our journeys and include what we think we might need to pack for an encounter with Christ in the Eucharist. Like the Scouts, and if you were a Scout, you know their motto is be prepared. So hopefully by the end of the evening, you'll feel prepared as well. Now let's go. Yay. I have to say, one of my favorite precious blood priests in the whole wide world is Pope Francis. That was a joke, folks. Pope Francis is not a missionary of the precious blood, but he sure does sound like one. He uses the image journey often. In a homily during the Advent of 2013, he wrote, "Always remember that life is a journey. It is a path, a journey to meet Jesus in the end and forever. A journey in which we do not encounter Jesus is not a Christian journey. It is for the Christian to continually encounter Jesus, to watch him, to let himself be watched by Jesus." This thing don't like me, don't. He wrote again, "When the Lord wants to give us a mission, wants to give us a task, he prepares us. He prepares us to do it well. What is important is the whole journey by which we arrive at the mission of the Lord entrusted to us. When the Lord gives a mission, he always has us enter into a process of purification, a process of discernment, a process of obedience, and a process of prayer." I think Pope Francis believes in the whole idea of being prepared as well. I don't want to bore you with a bunch of Pope Francis's quotes, but as I was doing some research, they just kept saying, please share this one. And this one seems so fitting for our talk tonight. He said, "The scripture and the Eucharist are the indispensable elements for encountering the Lord. We too often go to Sunday Mass with our worries, difficulties, and disappointments. Life sometimes wounds us, and we go away feeling sad toward our Emmaus, turning our backs on God's plan. We distance ourselves from God, but the liturgy of the word welcomes us. Jesus explains the scriptures to us and rekindles in our hearts the warmth of faith and hope. And in communion, he gives us strength." Remember that line. We're going to come back to that later. Finally, he wrote about journeys as part of the synodal process that is occurring now. As he introduced the synod, he wrote, "This journey, which follows in the wake of the church's renewal proposed by the Second Vatican Council, is both a gift and a task. By journeying together and reflecting together on the journey that has been made, the church will be able to learn through her experience which processes can help her to live communion, to achieve participation, to open herself to mission." The Pope isn't the only one who talks about journeys. All you have to do is open up the Bible. I did a quick perusal. There are over 150 references to journeys in Scripture. The Old Testament tells us of the journeys of Adam and Eve, Abraham and Isaac, and one of my favorites, the travels of Moses, just to name a few. In the New Testament, we have, of course, the trip of Mary and Joseph to Bethlehem that we'll read about in just a few weeks, it feels like. Another one of my favorites, Paul traveling on the road to Damascus when he falls off his horse, and the many travels of Jesus on the road to Jerusalem. And of course, the story of what happened on the road to Emmaus. Now, this is the audience participation portion of this presentation, because y'all didn't think I was going to be doing all the talking for 45 minutes. No. So I want to hear from you. There's some microphones there if you feel so inclined. What are some of your favorite journey stories? You did not flunk it. Go ahead, Father Jim.
The Wizard of Oz.
Okay, that works.
The Wizard of Oz. That's my favorite journey story.
I think the one I think of is the family one is 11 of us in one microbus going from here to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Oh, my.
It was great.
How about anybody in our Zoom family? Anybody want to add a story about their favorite journey? They're all being very shy and bashful. Doesn't look like it. Okay. Go ahead.
One of my favorite songs is by the monks of Western Priory called Journeys Ended, Journeys Begun. You want me to sing a little of that?
Yeah.
Of journeys ended, journeys begun, to go where we have never been, to be beyond our past. Moments of lifting up, transcending even death, rising in transparent life to the fullness of life in Jesus Christ.
Okay, seriously, Jeff is my friend and we did not prepare that in advance. While it seems fitting tonight to base our theme for the talks of Eucharist on the story of the disciples on the road to Emmaus, I'd like to offer a different turn. Tonight, there we go. I want to focus on the story found in the Gospels of Mark, Matthew, and Luke, in particular because it models the actions of what is being asked of us each time we go to the Eucharist. So in the Gospel of Mark, we read, after 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John and led them up to a high mountain apart by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his clothes became dazzling white. Such as no fuller on earth could bleach them. Then Elijah appeared to them along with Moses, and they were conversing with Jesus. Then Peter said to Jesus in reply, Rabbi, it is good that we are here. Let us make 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. He hardly knew what to say. They were so terrified. Then a cloud came, casting a shadow over them. From the cloud came a voice. This is my beloved son. Listen to him. Suddenly, looking around, they no longer saw anyone but Jesus alone with them. As they were coming down the mountain, he charged them not to relate what they've seen to anyone. We go up the mountain, we go down the mountain. Every time we celebrate the Eucharist, we have a similar experience than that of the disciples. Many years ago, a pastor friend of mine taught me that the word used for communion for the dying is called viaticum, and it's loosely translated to mean food for the journey. I believe that we should be using that term more often, especially when we receive communion on Sunday, because we receive Christ broken and poured out for us. In receiving the Eucharist, whether we're dying or not, aren't we receiving viaticum? We're nourished and strengthened again to go down the mountain to fulfill our role as disciples in bringing forth the kingdom. Like the disciples, we need that transformative moment with Christ, but then we're required to go one step further and to continue to share the message in our journey. It's tempting to want to stay at Mass. I love our church. I love most churches that I go into. I can understand why Peter wanted to stay on the mountaintop with Jesus. Every time I hear that scripture, I think, yeah, Peter, I get you. I would want to do the same thing. While it's restful and prayerful to stay with Jesus, this is not the last stop on our mission. Some of you might have heard the story of the priest describing the symbols of liturgy. Of course, he pointed to the ambo, also called the altar of the word, the altar. And this altar, I had a priest tell me when he saw it, this is the altar at the cathedral in Los Angeles. And a priest friend said that is the biggest altar he'd ever seen in his life. And the presider's chair. While the disciples, but we ignore one important sign. While the disciples in Mark's gospel were told to remain silent, our mandate as the people of God is to share God's love with the world. Yet we struggle to fulfill our mission and journey as the people of God today. You and I may understand these special moments of the journey when we get to sit with Jesus and sharing his body and blood. But many people still struggle with these ideas. I'm sure you've heard, who hasn't, that the bishops of our country have asked us to have a year of Eucharistic revival. I have to confess, when I heard the news first time, I was not a big fan. But the more as I prepared this talk, I came to understand we need to reignite ourselves as the people of God. It's hard to fully accept our role as a Eucharistic people because the messages we've received are nutty and all over the place. The wisdom figures in my family, when I started working for the church, regaled me with stories about being the frozen chosen. They lived through Mass in Latin, and they always brought their prayer books because you didn't understand a word of what was going on, but you had to be there because it was a Sunday obligation. Homilies? Forget about it. How many people love the bells at Mass? These weren't included to make liturgy beautiful. It was to tell the frozen chosen who weren't paying attention because they didn't understand that something important was happening and they needed to look. Because people were so disengaged in these times, very few people received communion because they didn't see the relevance of it. Personal prayer was seen as more important than participating in the liturgy. Even throughout all of this, though, and I've asked many of my relatives this, despite all of this, though, people still kept coming to Mass because it was their Sunday obligation. They understood their role: pray, pay, and obey. Any other stories anybody else has heard? Oh, come on, don't be all quiet now. I know I've only hit a few of them. I'm going to stand here for a minute until somebody talks.
I remember my older brothers and sisters who were like 10, 12, 15, 13 years older than I am. It was always under severe penalty of grave sin, mortal sin. And you didn't dare want to not, be in mortal sin. You step out on the corner and somebody runs over you. You were going to die and go to hell. So they kind of grew up with that. Of all the 7 of us kids in my family, I'm the only one that's still Catholic. It's a regular participating Catholic, let's put it that way. So that was always kind of in the background. We all went through 12 grades of Catholic school. And that's where we are today, part of the nuns, NONES.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Anybody on Zoom, Dennis?
Oh, I got one from here. I think that before Vatican II, there was a thought that you should go to confession the first Thursday of the month and receive communion on the first Friday of the month. So there were some Catholics that just received just once a month, the first Friday of the month.
Wow.
And so I don't think I think it was they believed in real presence, but I think they thought that they weren't worthy enough to receive it often. And I don't know if you could say today people receive it too many times and without preparation, spiritual preparation.
Mm-hmm. Here's her Zoom family. Jenny, hold on. We have to use the microphone. I should explain because
Yes.
our family on Zoom can't hear what's being said in here if we don't use the microphone.
Well, I've thought about this in these later years and looking back, and like most of us here, I went 12 years to Catholic school, and it was true. We did everything we were supposed to do, and we just did it. But I'm thinking now, as I'm older, we did the Baltimore Catechism that you have to memorize everything, but that was memorizing the words. But no one in those days actually explained things like they do now with understanding and what it all meant in this deeper level.
Mhm.
And I think if that had been done, especially when you get to high school now, little first and second graders, probably not so much, but in high school and later on, and in the Sunday homilies, most of this was not even talked about or really explained. So people really didn't understand anything except that that's what you did on Sunday.
Mhm.
Of course, going to a Catholic grade school, we did it every morning. But that's just what I've come up with of late, of thinking about these things, that we missed so much when we were younger, pre-Vatican II especially, because you were taught things, but that's all. You were taught the words, but you never really delved into what they really mean.
Mhm. Mhm.
Vicky. What comes to mind for me is I'm the oldest of 7, and we went to Mass every Sunday because if we didn't, our parents would have had us by the ear. We walked up to the front of the church, and we better not make any noise and have to get carried out the main aisle. So it was just a repetition and fear almost when I was younger going. And now that I've matured a little bit and had a broader perspective, I can't wait to go to Mass.
I have to keep up my theme.
I flunked math, so Mike last week, so I have to have a holder. I remember not knowing what was going on through Mass when I was really young, but they also started children's choirs in my schools.
Mhm.
And I thought this was great because I could participate and know what was going on because I was singing and had a good time. And it kept with me. And now I sing in the funeral choirs.
I have to just share with Joyce this story about families. I come from a family, I have 5 sisters and a brother. So it's also, imagine my mother and father going to Mass every Sunday with all 7 children in tow. And of course, my father insisted that one always had to go to the 8 o'clock Mass, because if you went to the later Masses, you just run the rest of your day. And so you had to go to the 8 o'clock Mass, but he never took care of the children. We were not supposed to bring toys into church. We were supposed to sit quiet. My parents figured it out. They were at arm's length. So whoever was in the pew that was acting up got the whap in the head. Bless me, family, because when I was 7, I smuggled my Barbie doll into church. I got bored during the communion and decided to show everyone the Barbie dolls stark naked right before the elevation. I got drug out of Mass. I was 7. I don't think they let me back for the rest of the year. And look at me now. Can I have the screen, Dennis? Maybe not. So this might be, if we keep with our themes of journeys, this might be what my parents and the wisdom people in my family prepared for their spiritual journeys, what it might have looked like. Something amazing happened though. On December 4th, 1963, our instructions for packing for our journeys changed. And believe it or not, this is an actual picture of the Second Vatican Council. The people of God were given new instructions. And they were so important, it was the first document promulgated by the council, the Constitution on the Sacred Liturgy. It called each of us to full, active, and conscious participation in the liturgy. The understanding and the need for participation was so important to the Council Fathers, it appeared 16 more times in that one document. No more was there to be frozen chosen. The council affirmed the active participation of the faithful was an inherent right by reason of our baptism. And I'll get back to that word right in a minute. So all of a sudden, we got new luggage. The Constitution said, the church, therefore, spares no effort to ensure that when present at this mystery of faith, Christian believers should not be there as strangers or silent participants. On the contrary, having a good grasp of it through the rites and prayers, they should take part in the sacred action, fully aware and devoutly. They should be formed by God's word and be nourished at the table of the Lord. Remember that word right? Here's another little fun fact that we learned in 1963. The Code of Canon Law, the laws that structure our church, actually has a law that says you, as the people of God, have rights. You have rights, people, and we have to stop saying, oh, we can't bother anybody. You have rights, just as you have rights as United States citizens. You have rights. It has been over 60 years since that document was promulgated, yet it's still a struggle for our journey to the Eucharist. These struggles were and continue to be fostered by some clergy and bishop, even in our churches today. We're not blameless in this tension. We, along with our brothers and sisters in our parish community, are also guilty of continuing these struggles. Another one of my favorite priests, Cardinal Supich, wrote, many Catholics may not know their call to active participation in Eucharistic ministries, and they may not have an intentional commitment to it. They may not have an intentional commitment to participating in the Eucharist. It's not that we don't believe in the body and blood of Christ. We just don't really put a lot of energy into it. He continued that many feel as long as they are doing something, how many times have you heard that, serving in ministry, that they're active. He concluded that many still view their engagement as fulfilling an obligation, a private time with Jesus, an intimate or meditative moment. How many of our brothers and sisters still see liturgy as a spectator sport? How often do we hear, why should I go? I don't get anything out of it. My other personal favorite, and no offense to the music ministers in the house, I love to come to Mass to listen to the choir. How often have we heard, we might have even said it ourselves, I don't go to church. I can't understand Father, and the homilies are always bad. Sometimes I hear from parents when I was in parish life that made me want to pull my hair out. I won't come to mass if my children don't have anything to do. What other struggles have you heard about? Come on, I know all of your parish, I know your parish communities, and I know they're all not perfect. Who said our parish council sucks? Any other? Any from the Zoom circle? Everybody's quiet. Okay, well, I'm going to ask you another question. Maybe you'll warm up to this one. When do you need to achieve that full, active, and conscious participation? This intentional moment that we're called to do. What do you need to have that happen? For yourself, what do you need to have it happen to have that intentional moment where you understand and fully appreciate that transfigured moment, that moment with Christ? What do you need? Better homilies? Liturgies that aren't thrown together at the last minute? One of my personal favorites, none of the precious blood priests, I'm going to say that right now, because I know it's being taped. Other priests that are not precious blood, they actually brag about the fact that they can get through liturgy in less than 15 minutes. And that's with the homily. When do we have time to pray? What are some of the things that you would put on your list that you need? Now's your time to speak now. The floor is yours.
I think that coming before Mass and spending some time so you don't rush in, Mass starts, you got a little time to kind of decompress or relax or read the readings or pray before Mass, because I see people rush in and they go right into Mass and there's no what I call spiritual preparation. So
There's one parish in the Kansas City area that when they're a real chatty group. They come into church and they really enjoy visiting with the people in the pews beside them and behind and before them. And so there's kind of a community being built there. As I think about it now, maybe that helps enter into a communal prayer. But then about 3 minutes, it seems, before the opening song is going to be announced, the cantor or somebody comes at a microphone and invites the congregation to be silent now for a few minutes as we prepare to for this Mass. And it just gets quiet. All the chattiness just turns off. and it's a profound silence. It's really neat.
What other things do you need? Do we need better music?
I know one of the things that helps me to feel like I am more a part of the liturgy is preparing ahead of time, reading the readings and reading some reflections on the readings, and then going to Mass and not hearing everything for the first time. It helps prepare me mentally, but also spiritually. So I think that, but yes, we always need good music. I mean, that to me, that is an integral part of a good liturgy.
One of the comments I used to hear from people all the time, and I was a liturgist in our parish, if the Mass went over 59 minutes, people's hair was on fire. And I said, you know, if you really understand what the church asks us to do, and we do everything that the church requires of us to do, no liturgy will be under 2 hours. They didn't like that answer either.
Well, I think what I have found out going through this, especially through this Eucharist, is that education, like coming to terms with what is really happening at the Eucharist, that people would embrace it more. It's more than just the liturgy. It's more than the music. It's the fact when you receive the Eucharist and you look around and everybody else that's receiving the Eucharist are in Jesus's realm right now. And you look at them and say, everybody has been touched, you know, and people would look at it more than just what the music is and who the priest is and who's around you. It's more what just happened, and to prepare for the rest of the week and take that with you. To me, it'd be just more education, and also a church that is really Christian and open to all, and everybody is welcome. Nobody's banished. It's just, I think that would just make it even better too.
Joyce.
Yeah, Vicky, what I was going to say is, I agree with the lady that likes to read the scriptures for the Mass beforehand. I do that at home. And then it does resonate with me better when it is said at the Mass. And maybe it's from my childhood, but I like to sit up toward the front. That way I'm not distracted about the mother that's combing her daughter's hair and the kids that are eating and all the things that go on. When I've ended up sitting in the back, I get very distracted. So I also think that we could use a little bit more quiet time, maybe after communion. I really love music, but we have no time to sit with Jesus as part of our bodies and just be. I would like that.
Getting back to preparing for Mass, I like Sister Joyce Zimmerman's explanation of you should start preparing to come to Mass when you're still at home, when you're getting dressed to come, when you're in the car coming to Mass, instead of discussing, well, where shall we go to eat afterward? What should we do? You know, be thinking already before you even leave the house and after you get there, where you're going to, what is about to happen. And then when you come in to the narthex or the gathering area, whatever that's called, I think you would come in a little more aware of where you are and what you're going to, rather than standing around and visiting with everybody until the last second, and then, you know, rushing in at the last second, or as my husband says, who is an usher most every week, people come in always like 10 minutes after it started. You start preparing, and you allow your time so that you can get there in time, and you go in, and then you can be quiet and you can prepare for what's about to begin.
One more.
I have one.
Oh,
I have
good.
one. I think as lay people, we need to reclaim some of the responsibilities that we had for the celebration of the Eucharist. And, you know, the changes of responsibilities specifically for Eucharistic ministry, I think, over the last few years is, I don't care for them. You know, if you go to a large parish, you have a priest all by himself at the altar trying to divvy up hosts into enough patents so that they can be taken for distribution. And then at the last minute, a gaggle of lay people rush the altar and then receive communion one at a time from the priest before they can go distribute communion. I mean, they're all commissioned Eucharistic ministers. They have, if it's done right, they have studied, they understand, they have been commissioned. They should be at the altar with the priest assisting. I think it's a small thing, and yet I think it's really very important because there's so much symbolism of that, of the lay people actually assisting the priest, not swooping in at the last minute, but coming and bringing the gifts to the altar, helping the, it is like the disciples breaking up the loaves and the fishes, that kind of stuff. I think we need to reclaim that as lay people.
At our parish, we had someone collapse during communion. And our pastor at the time rushed over to anoint that person before he went off to the hospital. And so the Eucharistic ministers were all standing looking at each other. And I was like, well, let's go and take care of things. And they're like, we can't go to the altar. And I'm like, why not? Let's go. But they thought the church was going to fall in if they touched the altar. And I was like, come on, people, it's okay. So I'm with you, Dennis, on that one. It's really easy to point fingers when we talk about liturgy, to point fingers and say, well, Father's responsible because liturgy is bad. The musicians are responsible because liturgy is bad. The bishop's is responsible. I'm going to use another travel symbol. You know how when you hear the safety instructions on the plane about the oxygen mask, you have to put your mask on first before you can help others. We need to pack our own bags for the journey with exactly what we need to have in there. So we need to take some responsibility for what we want to put in. Some of you have already addressed a few things. I'm going to add a few more. I believe that we need to include an understanding that when we gather for Eucharist, this is not a me and Jesus moment. It's an action of the ecclesial body of Christ, the church. Hopefully, we can each foster a personal relationship with Christ daily through prayer in whatever form that it takes. But liturgy is a work of the community. When you're not there, the community is weakened because you're not present. We are the body of Christ. Somebody also said, and I agree, we have to understand what the celebration of liturgy is. We've been given a beautiful gift. It amazes me every time it's celebrated. But sometimes, and we've all been there, we get people's interpretation of what they think the liturgy should be. So it's not quite what the church asks us to do. It's what a person thinks that we're supposed to do. This deviates from the gift that we've been given by the church. We don't know enough about liturgy to say, whoa, we need to learn more. So I agree with you. Education is important. We also need to make the commitment to be part of a parish community. In the United States today, we're used to I'm going to stay in my little box. Don't bother me. I only want to talk to people I want to talk to. And a community that might not sound like us or think like us, we have to be part of that. We're bound by our baptism, and we have a call to holiness that we celebrate when we gather for Eucharist. But we can't do that if we don't make the intention of being part of that community. And I agree, several people have mentioned this already. I've tried packing 30 minutes before I was supposed to leave on a trip, and that was even more disastrous than when I actually planned. We can't just throw things in a bag. We need to do some preparation. We need to sit with readings before Mass begins. We need to spend some time in prayer. We have to take those times to prepare. We also need to ensure that we're not trying to stuff God into a box on our schedule. Cardinal Supich writes, Americans tend to live largely compartmentalized lives. We often feel comfortable separating realms of living, for example, the private, the public, religious, civic, recreational. And we know, if y'all were at Mass on Sunday, you heard the gospel. We must give to God what is God's. And that transcends those compartmentalized little boxes. The most important thing that we need to pack when we travel on our journey is to recognize the holiness that is being shared with us. The Eucharist calls us to an integrated life, recognizing that all that we are and do is sacred. The reception of the Eucharist is essential, but so too is our response. To live this integrated life is to recognize that there is no sacred in public. We cannot be a Sunday Catholic coming together for 1 hour of communion with the sacred. When we hear on Good Friday, when the veil was torn into two during the crucifixion, this meant every moment, every experience, every word, everything in our whole lives reveals God's presence to us. So this is the last audience participation portion of this presentation. So what else do you think we need to do to prepare for liturgy? Or have we named everything? Or what is one thing that you think you might try for the next week?
Thoughts that I have, I will second, third, fourth, whatever people talk about preparation. You have mentioned some of the other ladies here have mentioned. I do that. And when I don't do that in some weeks, I'm lost for that piece of it. I mean, I'm still there. I still participate. I don't believe you can be Christian and say my relationship is between me and God without the Christian community. We are called to be community. And that's a key piece for me. Sunday, I go Saturday evenings, but it's one of those things that I look forward to that. I'm enriched by that. And to your point with the exit signs, I go out into the world refreshed to be Christ for the world. That's what I'm called to be. I've had these discussions that I mentioned with my older brothers and sisters, and it just, sometimes I just want to bang my head against the wall. And it's important, I think, for us to recognize, to be called, to be baptized. That's what we are meant to be. We are meant to be community, to be food for the world, and to follow Jesus in those ways.
And I've been to Mass with Jeff. Everyone in the pews, all the pews knows Jeff. Jeff knows all the people's names. It really is quite a community. Anybody else? Okay.
Vicky? I keep butting in, but one of the things I really liked, we had the pastor that we had before he retired. He always used to end Mass by saying, go in peace, the Mass continues.
Very good.
And that helped me to really realize that what I got from Mass, I was to go forth and share. And sometimes you can do that better by your actions than by your words.
Thank you. Okay. So to be a Eucharistic people, we have to rejoice and participate fully in our celebration of the Eucharist. Each time we gather to be fed at the table of the Word and the table of the Eucharist, and notice how I said two tables, we are strengthened and transformed. When we prepare for our journey to go up to the mountain with Jesus as we celebrate the Eucharist, Jesus strengthens and feeds us to continue the journey as we again go down the mountain. The Eucharist is indeed food for the journey. Thank you. I'm supposed to tell you, don't forget to visit the Precious Blood Renewal, the Precious Blood Renewal Center website for a list of their activities. Go ahead. I'm done with the commercial.
I was just going to ask if you would put that Ubuntu slide back up so that I was just about to take a picture of the prayer. And it way back at the beginning, I guess. I don't know if that'll work very easily, but thank you.
It would if my machine decided it wanted to behave. One more time. Whoop.
There, perfect. Thank you.
And if you can actually Google that and it tells you where it comes from.
Well, and I see it's on YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Be safe going home.